This morning, a 71-year-old man passed away. His name won't make the headlines. There won't be breaking news alerts or a trending hashtag. To the world, he was just another person, one of thousands who leave us every single day. But his story might just change the way you live your life. Because here's the truth. We all know that one day our time will come, but we live like it won't. We push things off, our dreams, our health, our relationships, always assuming we have more time. We think, I'll do it later, I'll say it tomorrow, I'll fix it eventually. And then, one day, later, runs out. Please have patience and listen to this to the very end. I promise this will be the best thing you've listened to today. This man had plans. He had dreams, just like you and me. Maybe he wanted to take that one last trip, finally learn the guitar, or call an old friend he hadn't spoken to in years. But yesterday, those were just thoughts in his mind. Today, they no longer exist. So let me ask you something. If today was your last day, would you be proud of the way you lived? Or would you be filled with regret? Because the truth is, most people don't fear death itself. They fear dying with unfinished business. They fear realizing, in their final moments, that they spent too much time worrying about things that didn't matter and too little time cherishing the things that did. And here's what's even scarier. Most people don't realize this until it's too late. So today, we're going to do something different. We're going to look at this man's life, not through the lens of sadness, but as a mirror for our own. Because if we pay attention, if we truly listen, his passing could teach us some of the most important lessons we'll ever learn. Lessons about time, about health, about relationships, about what truly matters when everything else fades away. And by the end of this video, you might just look at your own life differently. Maybe you'll make a call you've been putting off. Maybe you'll stop waiting for someday. Maybe, just maybe, you'll start living like time isn't promised. Because it isn't. Let's begin. If you ask someone in their 20s, 30s, or even 40s how much time they think they have left, they'll probably say, a lot. It feels like there's always a tomorrow, always more chances to do the things we want. But then, one day, time speeds up. The years blur together. A decade disappears in the blink of an eye. And suddenly, the things you thought you had plenty of time to do, they're still on your to-do list, untouched. The cruelest part of aging isn't just getting older, it's realizing how much time you wasted. If you sit with people in their final years, you'll notice something. They don't talk about the money they made, the promotions they got, or how many hours they worked. They talk about regrets, the things they didn't do, the words they didn't say, the chances they were too scared to take. Bronnie Ware, a palliative nurse who spent years caring for patients in their last moments, recorded the most common regrets of the dying. Her findings became famous because, across thousands of people, the same patterns emerged. The number one regret people had was, "I wish I had lived a life true to myself, not what others expected of me." Think about that for a second. Most people don't regret their mistakes as much as they regret playing it safe. They regret not chasing their dreams. They regret staying in a job they hated, ignoring their passions, or molding themselves into what others wanted them to be, because they assumed they had time to change it later, but later never came. The second biggest regret? I wish I hadn't worked so much. No one on their deathbed wishes they had spent more time answering emails or sitting in meetings. They wish they had spent more time with their kids, with their spouse, with their friends. They wish they had laughed more, traveled more, created more memories. But the world convinces us that work is everything, that success is measured in dollars, not in happiness. And by the time we realize that's a lie, it's often too late. Then there's the regret of not expressing feelings, of not telling people how much they mattered. So many people go through life assuming others just know how they feel. They don't say, "I love you" enough. They don't apologize when they should. They let years pass without reaching out to the people who once meant everything to them. And in the end, they wish they had spoken up before their chance was gone. The saddest part: every single one of these regrets is preventable, but most people don't take action because they think they have more time. And this is where the biggest lesson comes in. Time is the biggest illusion we believe in. We think we'll always have another year, another month, another day to fix things, to chase things, to become the person we always meant to be. But the truth, we don't know how much time we have left. That 71-year-old man who passed away this morning, he probably thought he had more time too. The real question is, are you going to wait until your final moments to realize what truly matters? Or are you going to start living differently now? When we hear about someone passing away at 71, most of us don't think twice. It seems normal. They lived a full life, people say. But did they? Because here's the shocking truth. 71 is not old. In places like Japan, Italy, and Costa Rica, people routinely live well into their 90s, and not just barely surviving, but thriving. They're still active, still social, still enjoying life. So, why do so many people in other parts of the world start deteriorating in their 60s, or even earlier? It comes down to habits. Most people don't die from old age. They die from a lifetime of small preventable choices. Take heart disease, for example. It's the #1 cause of death worldwide, yet 80% of heart disease cases are preventable. The same goes for type 2 diabetes, strokes, and even some cancers. These aren't sudden random events. They're the result of decades of daily decisions. What we eat, how much we move, how we handle stress. And here's where it gets terrifying. Most people don't feel the consequences of their choices until it's too late. That 71-year-old man, maybe he didn't think much about his diet. Maybe he skipped workouts because he was too busy. Maybe he put off checkups, assuming he felt fine. Then one day, his body said otherwise. Imagine two people. Person A eats mostly processed foods, sits for hours every day, barely exercises, and gets by on 5 hours of sleep. Person B eats whole, nutrient-rich foods, moves their body daily, manages stress, and prioritizes sleep. At 30, they might look the same. At 40, there's a slight difference. At 50, one starts getting prescriptions while the other is still hiking. By 60, one is slowing down, dealing with constant health issues, while the other is still vibrant and active. By 70, one is gone. The other has 20 more years of life ahead. The difference? Decades of tiny, almost invisible choices. That 71-year-old man who passed away this morning didn't get a warning sign. Maybe he did, but ignored it, assuming he had time. But you're hearing this now. And the question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? When people reflect on their lives, they don't talk about work. They don't talk about money. They don't talk about the cars they drove or the things they owned. They talk about people. The ones they loved, the ones they lost, the moments they shared. Because at the end of the day, relationships are the only thing that truly matter. Yet, somehow, we forget this while we're alive. We prioritize jobs over family dinners. We scroll through our phones instead of being present. We assume that the people we love will always be there, until they aren't. And when time finally runs out, most people have the same heartbreaking realization. I wish I had spent more time with the people who mattered. Scientists have been studying longevity for decades, trying to understand what makes some people live longer than others. Diet, exercise, genetics, they all play a role, but one factor stands out above almost everything else: social connections. In one of the longest-running studies ever conducted, Harvard researchers tracked a group of men for over 80 years, trying to figure out what led to longer, happier lives. The results? It wasn't money. It wasn't success. It wasn't intelligence. The single biggest predictor of happiness and longevity was the strength of their relationships. People who had close, meaningful connections, whether with family, friends, or a community, lived longer and were healthier, both physically and mentally. Meanwhile, those who were isolated or lonely had higher rates of disease, depression, and early death. In fact, researchers found that chronic loneliness is as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Think about that for a second. If you saw someone smoking a pack of cigarettes every single day, you'd be concerned for their health. But how many people do we know who go through life completely alone, and we don't think twice about it? What about him? The 71-year-old man who passed away this morning, who was there for him in his final moments. Did he have a family by his side? Children who visited him? Friends who checked in on him? Or was he one of the millions of people who grew old alone, quietly fading away without anyone really noticing? This is happening more than ever before. Families are becoming more distant. Friends are harder to keep. People are getting busier, more disconnected, and loneliness is becoming a silent killer. But it doesn't have to be this way. The time to reconnect is now. The problem with relationships is that we assume they will always be there. We think, I'll call them later. I'll visit next weekend. I'll make time when I'm not so busy. And then suddenly years pass. Suddenly, we don't know what's going on in each other's lives. We don't reach out because it would be weird. And before we know it, the people who once meant everything to us are just strangers with shared memories. But there's a simple solution. Reach out now. If there's someone you haven't talked to in a while, call them. If your parents are still alive, visit them. If you've lost touch with a close friend, send a message. Because here's the truth. One day, either they'll be gone, or you will. And the only thing worse than losing someone you love is realizing you let them slip away long before they were gone. Most people spend their entire lives chasing money. They wake up early, work long hours, sacrifice weekends, and push through stress, always believing that if they just work a little harder, earn a little more, they'll finally be free. But free to do what? For many, the answer never comes, because by the time they reach that mythical one day, they realize they've run out of time to enjoy it. Society convinces us that success is measured in numbers, bank accounts, salaries, net worth. The more you have, the more successful you are. But what's never talked about is what gets sacrificed along the way. The father who missed his child's first steps because he was stuck in a meeting. The woman who spent decades building a career but never made time for a family. The man who finally retired at 65, only to pass away 5 years later, having worked his entire life for a future he never got to experience. And then there's the harshest truth of all. Money can be replaced. Time cannot. Yet most people trade away their most precious years for the illusion of security, only to realize, too late, that the real currency of life was never money. It was time. Consider the story of Brian, a successful businessman who spent his life climbing the corporate ladder. He worked 70-hour weeks, made millions, and always told himself, once I retire, I'll finally live. He dreamed of traveling the world, spending time with his grandchildren, finally relaxing after years of stress. At 67, he finally retired. 2 months later, he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He never took that trip. He never got to enjoy his wealth. He had spent his healthiest, most energetic years working, only to leave the world before he could enjoy the rewards. His final words to a friend: I wish I had started living earlier. What we can learn. Most people assume they'll get to enjoy life later. But what if later never comes? What if the time you're sacrificing now, the time you spend away from your family, the vacations you don't take, the moments you postpone, is the only time you were ever guaranteed? The world tells us that we need more money, more things, a bigger house, a nicer car. But in reality, happiness doesn't come from wealth. It comes from what we do with the time we have. And the people who live the longest, happiest lives, they understand this. Instead of asking, how much money can I make? Start asking, how much time do I actually have left? Am I using it wisely? If I died tomorrow, would I be happy with how I spent today? Because the truth is, life is not a savings account. You don't get to store time and use it later. You either spend it wisely now, or you lose it forever. So, before you put in another late night at work, before you sacrifice another weekend, ask yourself, are you working for a life you'll actually get to enjoy? Or are you trading away the one thing you can never get back? Some people pass away with peace in their hearts, a quiet knowing that they lived fully, loved deeply, and left something behind that mattered. Others leave this world with a heavy sense of regret, wishing they had done more, been more, lived more. So, what separates the fulfilled from the regretful? Purpose. Having a purpose, a reason to wake up every morning, doesn't just make life better, it actually makes life longer. Purpose isn't just a nice idea, it's essential for survival. A life without purpose isn't a life, it's just time passing. Here's the truth. Purpose isn't something you find, it's something you create. And it doesn't have to be grand. You don't need to start a company, write a book, or change the world. Your purpose is simply what makes your life feel meaningful. It could be teaching others, creating something, taking care of loved ones, helping your community, experiencing the world fully and deeply. The key is to never stop growing, contributing, or finding joy in the everyday moments. The final question. The 71-year-old man who passed away this morning, did he die fulfilled? Did he feel like his life had meaning? We may never know, but what we do know is that we still have time to make sure our own lives do. So ask yourself, what excites me? What impact do I want to leave behind? If I only had a year left, what would I do differently? Because at the end of your life, you won't be asking, how long did I live? You'll be asking, did I live well? And the answer to that question, that's entirely up to you. So, what can we learn from the passing of this 71-year-old man? His story, though ordinary, holds some of life's most powerful lessons. Lessons that too many people realize only when it's too late. We've seen how health is fragile, and how small daily choices determine whether we thrive into old age or fade away too soon. We've seen how relationships, not money, not status, are what truly matter in the end. We've seen how so many people work their entire lives for a future they never get to enjoy. And we've seen how purpose isn't just a nice idea, it's the very thing that keeps us alive. But now comes the most important part. What are you going to do with this knowledge? Because the truth is, nothing changes unless you do. Take a moment and ask yourself, if today was your last day, would you be happy with how you've lived? Would you look back with peace, knowing you spent your time wisely, loved deeply, and pursued what truly mattered? Or would you feel regret over the words left unsaid, the dreams left untouched, the time wasted on things that never really mattered? Most people avoid this question because it's uncomfortable. But the uncomfortable truth is this: we don't know how much time we have left. We assume we have years, decades, plenty of time to fix things, to take action, to truly start living. But so did that man, and so did millions of others before him, until one day they didn't. Your time is now. This isn't meant to be depressing. It's meant to wake you up, because you still have time. Time to start taking care of your health before your body forces you to. Time to reach out to the people who matter before they become just a memory. Time to stop chasing money at the cost of your happiness before you realize too late that wealth means nothing if you're too sick, too alone, or too tired to enjoy it. Time to find meaning in your life before you look back and realize you were only existing, not truly living. But that time is not unlimited. One day, whether in 50 years or tomorrow, your story will come to an end, just like his. And the only thing that will matter in that moment is how you spent the time you were given. So, what will you do differently? Will you keep waiting for someday? Or will you start making small changes today? Call that person you've been meaning to call. Take that first step toward your dream. Stop letting time slip through your fingers, believing you have plenty of it left. Because no one ever gets to the end and says, "I wish I had waited longer to start living." But many, far too many, realize too late that they never truly lived at all. So don't let that be you. Start now. Share this video with your friends. Because sometimes all it takes is one conversation, one wake-up call to change a life. And if you found value in this, hit that like button, not just for me, but as a commitment to yourself that you're going to start living with intention. Because time is the one thing we can't get back. So, let's make it count, together. Thank you.